witnessed the largest migration in human history by a long shot, and that is peasants from the countryside moving into the cities. But these are sort of impermanent relationships. They don't have their household registration cards. Their hukou is not based in the city. It's still in the countryside. And if they lose their work, and they're the guys building the buildings, sweeping the streets, doing the tunnels, being cooks, chefs, menial laborers, if the economy slows down and they lose their jobs, they are liable to be very unhappy because they've got nothing. And they can't go back to the countryside, most of them, because they no longer know how to farm. Someone else is using their land. They were redundant as farmers anyway to begin with, which is why they came to the city. And in fact, when I was in China just a few weeks ago, before the Chinese New Year, I was hearing a lot of people saying that there was a rise in the crime rate. People were being robbed at a much more rapid rate than before. And most people were blaming it on these immigrants who were out of jobs, had no money to go home for the New Year's, or they had jobs and they didn't get paid because of the slowdown in the global economy, and they were out robbing people. So this is a real problem for China. And it's a concern of the party, a grave concern of the party, which is why they are trying so desperately, and I should say, extremely successfully in this recent economic crisis, to stimulate the economy and keep it going. They're much more successful than we've been in stimulating our economy, because the whole edifice of this Leninist capitalism, this authoritarian capitalism, rests on the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to stay in power as a one-party system, and its legitimacy depends upon it keeping the economic engines going and allowing Chinese to feel there's a possibility to move up and to better their lives. Because as long as that is true, people will not be disposed to make trouble. They will not want to go through that political door. You know, you talk now in China about politics or 1989 or something, and, you know, most Chinese will just say, 别说了. Let's not talk about it. You know, let's get to work and make some money. That's what people are fixated on, and the party knows this. So this dynamism that Deng Xiaoping kicked loose has been incredibly successful, but it's somewhat precariously balanced. And it's also balanced somewhat on the back of America, because we are such a big economic consumer, even in our penurious state of today. China still depends on us. And when we stop buying, thousands of factories close down in China. And they're all manned by migrant labor that's come in from the countryside. And those people start getting angry, unhappy. And of course, that's how the Chinese Communist Revolution began. You know, angry workers and angry peasants getting a bad deal. So this is a kind of a very interesting dilemma for the Chinese Communist Party. Now, you know, you may wonder, where did this energy come from? Why did China suddenly decide after 1989 that it was going to sort of turn itself over? And I don't have a completely convincing answer to that, but I think two things occur to me. And probably the most important is that there was a quality about China during those first years when I went there that was suffocated. If you were interested in the slightest in making money, you were a capitalist roader and you got in trouble. You'd get sent off to May 7th cadre training school. You'd get what they call xiafang. You get sent off to the countryside, and a lot of Chinese of that era are still out there in the boondocks. And you have to work with the peasants. And when Deng Xiaoping came to power, and I remember going to China during those years and thinking, what is going on here? You know, can I believe my ears? One of the slogans in Chinese that he launched was, 富裕光荣, to get rich is glorious. What? to get rich is glorious. I mean, that was a recipe for disaster just a few years before. And then he began to say that to extol the idea of a 10,000 yuan household. Yuan is the Chinese dollar. What? You know, this was just the exact opposite of everything the last 30 years had stood for. So he allowed people to feel that, in fact, they could make something of their lives. And it was very powerful. And this pent-up energy, this suffocated energy from all those years when people were told, serve the people, not yourself. Don't dress up. Don't express your individualism. You shouldn't worry about falling in love. You should marry who the party tells you to marry. And in those days, you couldn't pick your job. You were what was called chadui. You were assigned your job. And that was it. No choice. And you couldn't pick a place to live. You couldn't buy a place to live. You went where your unit sent you. And suddenly Deng Xiaoping says, you know, this isn't working. Let's enthrone, let's respect private initiative. And this released this incredible, you know, explosion of energy, which continues to this day. I mean, now, I think it was like, what, 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I can't remember. There were maybe, I remember when the first millionaires came around, and that was impressive enough. And now there are people with private jets. And I think there's something like, last count, 160 billionaires, 100 and some odd billionaires. I don't know, however many it is, it's a lot of billionaires for a country that didn't even have a millionaire not so long ago. Now, of course, this has opened a giant abyss between the rich and the poor. We know something about that in this country. And it's a real problem. And still, there's a big state-owned sector. And this means that the officials that are in charge of property are in a really good position to be corrupt and make a lot of money. Because you have to imagine as if in the United States at some point the government had said, all right, everything, all the buildings, all the land, everything belongs to the state. No private property. China still doesn't have private property. And then it starts, then if we decide in the United States, well, okay, now we own it all, let's feed it back into the marketplace, which is what China has done. The officials who make those decisions